All Henshaw here again, Constitutional Kook Headquarters, and another of my ongoing series of cases on the Constitution, history, and laws of the United States. And here the issue we have, do we have any judicial courts left at all? And that's a huge question because if we don't, what that tells you is that the Constitution doesn't remain in effect as the supreme law of the land, that we have no states remaining sovereign independent states that were admitted into this union, and that all we now have is a democracy, just like they have in Pyongyang, North Korea. 3 wolves, 2 sheep, voting on what's for dinner. If that's the case, there are no peaceful remedies left. What are we supposed to do? I mean, think about that. When you get pulled over by one of these law enforcement thugs, in my day, by the way, they were called peace officers, and there were very few traffic stops made in that day and age. It just didn't happen. They hadn't gotten that far along with the DMV crap like they have today. But what do? You get stopped. And what do they say? Tell it to the judge. Not only is there no judge, there's no jury either, for a variety of reasons that you can learn from my modestly priced constitutional defense document packets. Send me an email, uwinnincourt@gmail.com, and I'll get you the information out you're going to learn. There's no qualified juror pools to start with, no qualified jurors, and there can't be with no sovereign independent states. We don't have anything remotely resembling the sovereign body politic of the states, namely 3 white male and 21. Get used to it. That's the way it was. That's the way it is and will be unless or until the Constitution is amended in accordance with that document, not in contravention of all 6 articles, which is exactly what happened with the 13th and 14th War Amendments. And you'll learn all about that too. Send me an email, uwinnincourt@gmail.com. This is how important it is for all of us, because yeah, they might have made us all quote unquote equal by that amendment, but not by elevating freedmen to the status of state citizens, which could not be done in the manner it was attempted, if that was the true agenda, and it wasn't. Those of you that don't know, the secret intent of the amendment was to make citizens out of artificial corporate entities. And that's all they recognize in their system. Look at the voter registration form. You got to declare under penalty of perjury you're a United States citizen. Large U, large S, small c, born in the United States, and you're then a citizen of the state in which you reside. All of these terms are pregnant with legal issues that they don't want you to know about. You'll learn about them. Send me an email, uwinnincourt@gmail.com. One big one here, but it says the state in which you reside. We don't reside in a state. We are domiciled in a state judicial district. And what you learn is, among other things, with the good old Internal Revenue Code, Title 26, Section 7408D says, in effect, if a taxpayer, quote unquote, and that's a synonym for corporation, can't be found in a United States judicial district, whatever the hell that is, he can be found, and they should have said it, can be found for all jurisdictional purposes in the District of Columbia. That's the only place the income tax is valid, if it is at all. That's what they're doing. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, and or using provisional governments under Article 4, Section 3, I believe it is. Where there's no sovereign body politic, where Congress just controls everything, and they do it conveniently pursuant to the military government that's in power now, headed by the president as commander-in-chief of the armed forces. But they did, by the way, exactly how it occurred with the bank holiday in 1933 with Franklin Delano Roosevelt. First week the bastards in office, he declares they shut the banks People can't go in there and get their gold and silver coin out, and does it based on a state of emergency. He has the unfettered discretion to declare under the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, 12 U.S.C. 95 A and B. Fortunately for us, we can prove it's the non-existent Federal Reserve Act. And more to the point, and much more revealingly, he also used the Trading with the Enemy Act of 1917, also non-existent. That's what they think free white citizens are these days, undocumented enemy aliens. And really, everybody falls into that classification. It doesn't matter, but especially us, because we're the ones that have what the original intent of the framers recognized were creator endowed inalienable rights. And they don't want you to know anything about that. You know, they want you to think they're going to take good care of you. You just go out to the polls and vote every 2 years or 4 years or whatever it is, and they'll look after everything. Sure, they have. Look at the mess we have now in the United States. If framers could have seen any of this forthcoming, and with the exception of Hamilton, they probably wouldn't have had a clue. I mean, that's how bad this is. So here we are looking around for judicial courts. And as you'll see with my videos I'm doing with my good friend Adam Bruckey, who's just as much of a kook as I am, he sent the best petition into this U.S. Supreme Court I've ever seen. I helped him a little bit with it, 160 odd pages. And it got rejected by the clerk of the Supreme Court of the United States. The justices never saw it. How is that possible in the only judicial court created by the Constitution? I mean, think about that. That's, wow. It can't be. And yet, in doing so, he cited, I think it's 28 USC. I may get the statute wrong here, but I will come back and follow up on it. But 1251, that apparently regulates the original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. Congress can't do that. There's a big deal about this back in the day with Reconstruction in the case of Ex parte McArdle, where he petitioned for a bit of habeas corpus that should have been granted. He should have won the case, and the Reconstruction Act declared unconstitutional, which is exactly what the U.S. Supreme Court did at the time, but they were never allowed to announce the opinion because Congress exercised its authority, quote unquote, to regulate the appellate jurisdiction of the court. If they can do that, that takes out of play any possibility for a corporate entity or the corporate citizen that they think you are to be able to get there and do anything. In the original jurisdiction, and the court should have had the bona fides and the, and what's the word here? I can't think of it right now, but they should have stood up and said, not so fast. We're going to treat this as an original writ, which they had the discretion to do as an independent department of government. Had they done that at the time, the Reconstruction Act goes by the boards, as does the 14th Amendment, because the legislatures that ratified that amendment in the southern states were all military legislatures created by the Reconstruction Act. Now, the really good news for us is it wouldn't have mattered because even the legislatures that rejected the amendment and got replaced wouldn't have had the power to do it if the intent was to alter the makeup of the sovereign body politic of the nation and republic. Article 5 is clear about that. It says it can be ratified either by legislatures in the states or conventions of the people assembled. That's the difference with a principal and agent. We're the principals. We created the whole thing. We ordained and established this Constitution to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. We tell these bastards what to do, not the other way around. We get back to that government, however imperfect it may have been at the beginning. We can work from there and make changes to make that better. And now we have most of the government power back in the state capitals, or even more importantly, the county seats where most of it should be. Much less expensive, much more efficient, much easier to control. How is that for a trifecta? That's what we want. And the last thing the New York banksters want to see is going to put them out of power too. And that's why we have all this divide and conquer bullshit going on, especially recently, with the striking amount of black people that have been murdered by law enforcement thugs. And notice the difference there, brother. When that happens, you're lucky if one of those bastards even gets prosecuted, let alone for first-degree murder, which it probably was, since the statutes didn't apply to the victim, and the court wouldn't have had jurisdiction, and they weren't acting in any official capacity. And what do they get? Voluntary manslaughter. You got Johannes Mesley out here who murdered Oscar Grant in a local Fruitvale BART station here. And he got, I think, maybe as much as 2 years jail time for it. And I think he was out in under a year for good behavior. Now, you go out and kill one of those law enforcement thugs, what do you get? If you don't get shot down on the street on sight, you go into court and you get at least life in prison, without parole, or they just give you 2,000 bolts and get it over with. What's the matter with this picture? The Supreme Court has ruled, for crying out loud, that we have a right to self-defense. Particularly true when they can't prove that we violated any of their statutes, and they can't do it. They can't even prove that we're persons within the meaning of the statutes. And they don't train these law enforcement thugs to know this. Doesn't the governor, in effect the territorial governor, have the sworn duty to see that the laws are faithfully executed? Wow. I mean, just think about this, the magnitude of it. And here again, the law enforcement thugs and the attorneys and you name it have all these political activity committees in the state capitals. They control the legislatures there, in which none of us are represented in any event. And that makes it bad enough. Where's the consent of the government here to any laws they enact there? As bad as that is in California, we have 80 members in the California State Assembly. Number hasn't changed since 1879 when that Constitution was enacted. At the time, the ratio of representation was somewhere around 13 or 14,000 to 1. Not unreasonable given the circumstances, but the population has increased 40 times or more now. We have 40 million people here. The ratio of representation is 500,000 to 1 in the California Assembly. What does the U.S. Constitution say? Maximum ratio of representation in the House of Representatives, 30,000 inhabitants to 1. That's a lot more like a federated Republican form of government of defined and limited powers, and for a variety of reasons I'll discuss in another video. But the numbers alone give it away. And it's all easily controlled because we have the two-party system, and you don't get elected there unless you're playing ball from day one. And you basically follow the corporate interests almost every time possible, unless it's so bad they have to make it look good. And that's all they ever do with civil rights. Think of Rodney King back in the early 90s, in Los Angeles. They have to make it look good, they'll do it. That's all they think we have. None of us, whether white citizens, state inhabitants, or anyone else, has any rights the de facto government is bound to respect. Once we start getting that change in place, and now we can make them not only responsible, but liable for their acts. How many of these bastards do you think we're going to have to put in jail before they get the idea to take their oath of office seriously? That's what we need to get going here, because it's there. We have rights, we have securities, and they don't recognize any of it, and they don't think they have to, because the state bar controls the quote-unquote judicial department of government and every jurisdiction out there. And that's what has to change. I mean, think about that. For example, you, I, and at least all other like state citizens are qualified without more to be appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court. Yet we're not quote-unquote qualified to run for election in any office of the judicial department, quote-unquote, of a state, quote-unquote. What the hell sense does that make? Absolutely zero. And this is how it's like this throughout. My goodness, it's hard to even tell you fully. But to learn a lot more about that, send me an email, youwinningcourt@gmail.com, on my modestly priced constitutional defense document packets, and you will learn a lot. And it applies across the board. Whether it's a mortgage bankster you're dealing with, the FTB, the IRS, family court, which might be the worst. I mean, all of it. They're not there. There's nobody that represents our interests. There's nobody that's properly been appointed or elected to office, as the case may be. And indeed, you'll learn there are no elections. And God, everybody out here in California is crying because now our delegation in Congress has been reduced from 53 to 52. Big deal. I mean, if you look at the ratio of representation at 30,000 to 1, and we got 40 million people here, what should we have? About 1,150 members in the House of Representatives, not 52. Do the math. That's the way it is. And the whole House, entire House would be consisting of somewhere around 11,000 plus if we had the numbers. And it's much more than just the numbers. If we had the right numbers, it works a lot better on a variety of grounds that you'll learn in upcoming videos, and also from getting my materials. You can send me an email, youwinningcourt@gmail.com, and I explain a lot about how that works and why it's so much better than the democracy that we have now. 3 wolves, 2 sheep voting on what's for dinner. And sooner or later, we have to get back to it, or they're going to take us over completely and do away with the quote-unquote right to bear arms, which has nothing to do with the Second Amendment. The NRA is not your friend. And I'll take on any of those batches in an acapella debate in any convenient time, place, and manner, and run them out of the room. Never has been a Second Amendment issue. Goes all the way back to Presser v. Illinois, 1886. I think you people will learn something in the last 135 years. So we do it properly. We have every right in that area. So a story for another day, video for another day. But that said, if there are no courts, and if Congress can control the original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, and remember, this is a Congress in which we are not represented. 0. If they can do that, they can control the whole government. Any law they want to pass, they can damn well pass it. And only on the very rare occasion where they have to make it look good does anything positive happen. And I wouldn't lose any sleep waiting for that to happen anytime soon either. It's just not going to. So that said, remember to subscribe, like the videos, tell your friends, get the word out. The sooner we start working together across the board, Asians, Africans, and Americans, and cut out all this divide and conquer crap they've been doing for way too long, the quicker we get these bastards off our backs. Thank you.